Guess what? It's me, Bryce, back with another episode. I know, it's been a while. It's been a minute. Bryce, where have you been this last year? Well, anyway, today's episode is going to be absolutely incredible and it will keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. Definitely a load of fun to listen to. So today's awesome guest is Matty van Gutham, also known by Matt Van Geo on all these social media platforms. We chat about his incredible African experiences, as well as common species in the reptile hobby that are not so common in the wild, because Matt is literally out there all the time in the field, all around the world, looking and finding these incredible reptiles. He's totally an avid herper, and he's such a nerd. He won't mind me saying that because, he is, and so am I. But nerds are good. We need guys like Matt in the world to find these incredible animals and also see how we're keeping them in captivity versus how they are in the wild. So maybe we should go to the wild to find out how we should actually look after the species that we keep. But also, he found a species that's never been recorded in Kenya. It's pretty freaking exciting. So stay tuned. Let's get straight into the episode with Matt. If you want to find out any more information, go to animalsathome.network.com. You can click the Animals Everywhere podcast banner, and from there you will find the episode available on Spotify, Apple, all of your streaming platforms. So enjoy. Okay, so you ready to jump right in?
I'm ready to jump right in, dude.
You're listening to Animals Everywhere, a podcast that aims to inspire each and every one of you to make an impact and be the change. Learn more about our natural world, explore the lives of those wild and wonderful. My name is Bryce Broom, and I'm best known for my infatuation with wildlife and to live a wild life. Let's jump right in. So, thank you so much for joining me. Well, I joined you, I guess. I came out to your place.
Yeah, thanks for coming through.
Thank you for joining on the podcast. So, take us back to the beginning of where your fascination with all things wildlife began.
Wow. So I'm born in Belgium, and then when I was around 6 years old, we moved to South Africa. And obviously, as coming as foreigners to South Africa, you want to explore. My parents were quite big explorers, so we ended up going to all the game reserves and things around South Africa and around Johannesburg. And always I kind of just went straight for snakes. So my first memory or my first kind of interaction was when we went to a little reserve just outside of Mala, and there was a little rhombic night adder, which I thought was, an egg eater at the time.
Okay.
And ended up picking it up and handling it and whatnot, didn't get bitten. And shortly after that, the guy was like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't have picked up that snake." And then that kind of stemmed
So it was an egg eater though?
No, it was a night adder.
Oh, it was.
And I thought it was an egg eater, yeah. And the guy
cool.
told me, you really lucky you didn't get bitten. And at that point I was like, okay, maybe I should kind of get a field guide and know what I was doing, and never stopped from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it starts with night adders, because I also vividly remember an experience when I was down in the south coast, and I jumped off of this little bamboo forest, and as I was jumping down, there was a night adder in between my legs, so I opened my legs so I don't stand on the snake, and then I was like, wow, this is so cool. That's where it starts. We got some nice set dressing over here.
He's gonna come sit on my lap and you'll be quiet.
Give us some nice sound effects.
Yeah.
So it's not something that started because your family is into snakes and reptiles, or?
No, not at all. So my parents were always into a bit of wildlife, more outside adventure kind of stuff. My mom always took us on hikes. And whenever there was anything around me, it was even weird. I had this weird fascination. I was a bit of a kind of creepy scientist when I was a kid. And I used to pin insects and things like that onto pin boards, and I'd find a frog, kind of chloroform the frog, and then dissect it without even being at the point of biology class yet. I had this deep fascination of how things ticked inside somehow.
Oh, wow.
And from then onwards, it was just wherever we went, there, we'd go on a big hike and there'd be a massive rock path, and underneath the rock, and everyone would stand back and kind of, oh, that's amazing. And there's little me going, poking on the snake and seeing what's happening, and always this deep curiosity and fascination for kind of everything that no one else likes. Your scorpions, snakes, reptiles. It's kind of really my base and my biggest passion in the world.
So you also feel like it's the outcasts that do it for you?
Totally.
Same with me. It's not so much I don't love all the other animals. I really love everything. No, it's fine. It's cool. Just leave them there.
Just block the shot. Smarty, stop it. Sorry, guys.
Some amazing. You got to go watch this video on YouTube to see the pretty cat come and join us for the podcast. He has a few things to say. Like with sharks, spiders, snakes, it's all those animals that, I don't know, I just love everything. So I focus on those animals because I want to share my love also for that. So is it similar for you?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, like you say, it's not to say, I mean, we grew up in the bush, going to the bush all the time, going to the Delta and things like that. So wildlife as a general is a big passion of mine. But yeah, there's something about snakes. There's also something about like when you go on a game drive, you know, you see all the animals, but there's no interaction. Like with snakes and scorpions and spiders and things like that, there's some form of interaction where you can kind of really get up close and personal.
Yeah.
And if you let the snake behave very naturally, like we're doing more and more now with kind of my documentation, is kind of finding these snakes in their natural habitat, getting your camera gear ready, and then following the snake for an hour or two and see how it behaves. And just to be able to kind of naturally interact with snakes and reptiles and things like that is really like my biggest. It's really kind of to educate and show people that these animals aren't slimy, firstly,
yes,
aren't super scary, aren't always out to get you. You know, you only really negative experiences with snakes and these animals that people don't like is always somehow in the back of your mind, and you ask them, have you ever had a bad experience with a snake? They're like, no. I'm like, why are you so scared then?
Because I watched the movie Anaconda or Snakes
or
on a
Jaws,
Plane. Yes.
Exactly.
It's strange how that happens. Like, we preconditioned to fear these animals.
Yeah.
Even for myself, before like working with snakes on a daily basis, when I got my first snake, I was still like, oh, is it going to bite me? Even though I absolutely loved it, I was like, is it going to bite me? And you're a little bit worried, but then the more you learn, the less you fear. So that goes for working with venomous snakes as well.
100%.
There's a lot of stigma out there that is not needed.
Yeah.
Like black mambas and that, oh, it's a dangerous, deadly snake to handle. Yes, it is, but it's not like, it depends how you work with the animal, and that's how it's going to react to you as well. Yeah.
So I have a saying that I use more and more is like, people are always like, oh, mambas can be so aggressive, cobras can be so aggressive. And yes, in an intense situation, which is where most people encounter snakes, in their homes or in a kind of area where it's all of a sudden you're on the snake and then you react badly. If there's an intense situation, you can have an intense snake. Yes. If you have a calm situation, you can have a very calm snake. I've worked with mambas in open fields where you take the mamba out the box. Yes, it's electric at first. You walk alongside it, you use a very basic raking technique or just a hook where you can gently kind of direction the snake, and after half an hour the snake realizes you're not out to get it. And we've got some amazing natural history documentation of mambas moving very naturally with us not even a couple of meters away from it. So if the situation is calm, the snakes are calm. If the situation is intense, yes, you're going to have a very defensive and very bitey mamba.
Yes, the environment dictates the behavior of the animal in a big way. Mm-hmm. Even how we treat it and everything goes into account with that. Yeah. So following a snake for that amount of time requires a lot of patience, though. But that's epic. Yeah.
Yeah, you need a hell of a lot of patience. I mean, with a lot of these animals, you know, humans are just as scary, if not more scary, for us than they are. Well, for them, these big creatures that are kind of walking around them, and for them to act calmly, it takes them a little bit of time. So often, if let's say we have a snake, or let's call it a puff adder. We want to film the snake, we take it out and we put it out in a spot where it's in its natural habitat. It might take 45 minutes for that snake, with you standing nearby it, for it to actually start moving or slithering along or tongue flicking or acting in a natural way where it's not still reacting from a human stimulus. Oh my God, there's this big scary thing that's still staring at me, I mustn't move. So it takes a lot of time for these snakes to be able to start kind of reacting naturally and doing their natural thing, and maybe even hunting. We've seen snakes after 2 hours of following a snake, all of a sudden go into hunt mode. Meanwhile, you're not even 5-10 meters away from the snake. Wow. So like being able to interact peacefully with the snake and understand how it moves and what to do. Okay, cool, you make a sudden move. And it depends on the snake as well. Some snakes are very visual. You know, like mambas and stuff like that, cobras, you make a quick move and straight away it's going to react. Other snakes less so, you know, gaboon, rhinos, they just freeze. Dwarf adders, they just freeze. And then you get too close and it's huff, 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 huff. And you get a little bit too close and then it strike. So again, there's no such thing as an aggressive snake, only a defensive one.
Yeah. No. And you just got to read their behavior. Do you think a lot of what goes on with like the fear of animals and misunderstanding stems from now we're in the age of information, so we also aren't as patient, so we don't sit around and wait for things. We just want to see it right then and there.
Totally, very much so. I mean, I had an amazing experience now in Kenya. We just got back from Kenya, and we're in the Masai Mara, and we spotted some of our target species. I mean, cheetah, only 6,000 plus left of them in the wild. And not a lot of people will take that into consideration. You know, you'll see two sleeping brothers under an acacia, and after half an hour, 30 minutes, people are like, check, cheetahs off the list, and they drive on. Well, we didn't drive on, and we waited with those cheetahs for 2 hours. They stood up eventually, went on their first hunt, didn't succeed, went to the next tree. We sat with them under that tree for another hour and a half in anticipation and knowing that they will probably move again. And they did, and they repeated this for 7 hours. Wow. And we managed to film and watch four hunt attempts, which was absolutely incredible. But you've got to put those 7 hours in and be dead quiet in the vehicle and really respect the animal, keep your distance so that you're not scaring it, you're not intimidating the animal, giving it space to behave naturally, and then obviously get the content and the experience that you want.
Yeah, and that just comes from being patient and just being in the present, not waiting for something. You're just like, what happens, and we will be here to witness that and be ready. But you also can't be like, hey guys, it's Bryce here. We got this amazing animal. Sorry, I'm moving back from the mic because that's a bit loud. But you can't be that ecstatic and that around them when they're just busy chilling or getting into hunt mode, because we also don't want to interfere with what they're doing.
Yeah. So you start talking, it's like, hey guys, we've got some cheetahs over here.
Exactly. That's what you got to do. You whisper.
The nice thing is with snakes is you don't have to whisper too much.
Very, very true. So for talkative guys, it works nicely.
Yeah. Often when there's an intense moment there and the snake is doing something, like very often you find the whole team goes very quiet, and then there'll be one of the team members be like, guys, why are we whispering? Like, it's very chill. We could talk as like, no, it's the moment, you know, the whispering feels like the right thing to do right now.
But it's true, because I think the animals can also pick up on that, because we have chemical changes in our bodies also. When we become ecstatic and get excited, then our hormone levels increase and decrease. Mm-hmm. So then they can obviously smell that. Us humans don't have that incredible scent, but they do. Yeah. So maybe being quiet does in fact help. Even
it does. I mean, I'm maybe contradicting myself onto what I just said now, but I read or saw something quite recently. I think it was with a Bushmaster post, that actually very loud auditory like vibrations can also be picked up by certain species of snake.
Yes.
So really loud, like let's say a honking of a horn or kind of really loud kind of bellowing human beings can actually be picked up by certain species of snakes. So they're not entirely deaf.
Yeah, it's a different frequency range that they're able to hear. Because I think they do have internal ears as far as I know.
Yeah, it's just closed up and sealed off. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Can you go on about like your Mara experience in the Masai Mara?
Sure. So we arrived in the Mara, very, very excited to obviously see the Great Crossing, the Great Migration.
That's definitely on my bucket list. It has been for many years.
Yeah, one of the last natural spectacles of the world, one of the last areas with such incredible amounts and diversity of megafauna. I mean, Africa is probably one of the last places that has the amount of megafauna that places like the Mara and Kruger National Park do. But, you know, the Mara is fenceless. You know, it's still animals that are free roaming. And we ended up heading down to a crossing. You go to this kind of elevated point, you look for a couple of herds, and you see a herd coming down. And by the time you get to the river, you realize kind of the situation is not as pretty as it seems. We came up, and there were probably... On the eastern bank, there were probably around 40, 50 cars. On the other bank, another 50 cars. And previously, you were actually allowed to kind of pre-think, okay, cool, the wildebeest are going to cross here. Maybe there's a couple gullies where the wildebeest would be able to do it, and then the other points are not possible for the wildebeest. So they need to pick certain routes. And previously, you could park along these routes on the sides and then hope you get lucky and the wildebeest cross past you. And if you didn't, well, unlucky. Now they've changed the rule, and you have to keep your distance because they thought you'd block the wildebeest. So now you've got a line of 40 cars lined up here, 30 cars on the other side, and in the middle you've got this herd of wildebeest. And now it takes a lot of courage. It's the most dangerous part of their day or of their lives is doing this Mara crossing. You've got to deal with the water, crocodiles, hippos, fast-flowing water. I mean, it wasn't now fast-flowing, but there's a lot of factors that come into play. Exactly, predators on the other side. You know, it's really scary for them. So now you add in all these vehicles, and as they get to the precipice, the first like wildebeest, cool, I'm going to go down this little gully. You've literally got all these cars going from first to sixth gear within 5 seconds. And they are speeding towards these wildebeest. And every single time it happened, they were ready to go. The cars arrive and all the wildebeest run away.
Why do they speed up though? Like, can't you just wait and watch?
It's all clientele based. I think it's all people wanting to have the best spots and the best view and the best chance for a photo opportunity. And a lot of the people who are the drivers are Maasai people. The people who there's also other tour operators, etc. But there's a lot of politics about how and who can operate in the Mara and how they can operate. Maasai have got a lot of jurisdiction in the area, so they can kind of do as they please. And yeah, there's no legislation, there's no restrictions or control or anything to be able to restrict the amount of vehicles. And this was just post-COVID, so it's still kind of quiet. I've heard of times where there's 200-300 vehicles, and the animals actually can't make the crossing.
That's sad. So we're interfering with their natural behaviors in a big way just because we want to witness it.
Heavily so. So I mean, even so, like now you have, let's say, when we followed the cheetah brothers, the first 3 attempted hunts were almost completely by ourselves, maybe 1 or 2 vehicles with us. The 4th hunt, by the time they'd done maybe 6-7 kilometers, and we'd come back to a main road, and now the people had noticed that we were following cheetahs, and then again 30-40 cars, and there is a little bit of understanding. Cool, here are the cheetahs, here's the herd, you park behind the herd so that the cheetahs, there's nothing in between the cheetahs and the herd. And they started hunting, and again, it's all calm until it's not. Until that cheetah starts to hit 6th gear, there's cars literally pulling in front of the cheetah. There's literally cars that are blocking the way for the wildebeest to escape. So the animals are completely disorientated and actually don't know what to do. So now they
don't know which is the predator also, because
they don't know which way to run, And the cheetahs then get distracted because of the wildebeest running in different directions, the cars are running in different directions. So now there's actually reports of cheetahs in the Mara that are hunting at night under moonlight, which enables them to actually hunt in peace. Otherwise, for these, and at least I'll give it credit, it's only for 3 months of the year that the crossing is happening. And for the rest of the time, the Mara is a lot more kind of calm, where you can get a sighting with 2-3 vehicles, if not by yourself.
But there's not that natural migration that is supposed to happen with the millions of wildebeest
So there are. We were slightly unlucky now. The migrations kind of kicked off a month early. So a lot of the wildebeest had already crossed the Mara into the Serengeti in Tanzania. I think there are still mega herds. I'd be lying if I knew the numbers of what some of the crossings were in terms of numbers of animals. But from the last year before, I heard there was a crossing that took up to 2 hours to cross.
Wow.
So maybe call it 20, 30, 40, 50,000 wildebeest crossing in one go and continuously crossing. So I think the spectacle is still there, but it is diminishing year by year. But it's tough to say. I'm not the expert there.
Yeah. Do you think these animals find different routes and different places? Because generally they have the same migration route. Do you think that is changing now due to us?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when we were driving through into the Mara, there's a lot of farmlands before you get into the Mara Triangle. And our guide Alvera was busy telling us that before, all these like little kind of plots of land where people are farming was completely open. Now there's a hell of a lot of small fences that have gone up. So they're actually like the wildlife corridors that used to be actually not even a corridor, was just open, now really restricting the animals to tiny little avenues to be able to cross from area to area. So there's a lot less kind of ability for animals to do their natural migration. They're getting a lot more stuck in these certain areas, and it's making it difficult for predators, prey, and everything to be able to move around more naturally. Same with the elephants as well.
Because they don't have the massive natural migration route now, because it's been fenced up farmland. That's hectic.
Same with Ellie's big problem with elephants. They can't migrate from area to area. That's why they're desertifying certain areas like Botswana at the moment, is because there's no natural migratory routes anymore. They used to go up onto the baselands of Mount Kilimanjaro and then come back down. And elephants used to have super, very deep structured like movements in terms of like their natural migration. And none of it is possible anymore. So they really get stuck in certain areas, and then they turn it into a desert with their own doing, and then population will crash. It happened in Savo as well, where elephants were just dying naturally because of overpopulation.
Because they can't like migrate, so then they can't eat different foods, giving the plants time to grow. So then they decimate everything, and then they end up dying because of that. And that's our doing without us even knowing it, because of just destroying it.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
It's insane. Like I remember reading somewhere that they would actually go up from Kenya to Angola to the Delta, all the way even into KZN in South Africa, and have a huge migration route. And now that's not possible whatsoever.
No.
I know Kruger is busy working on ripping out their fences between Zimbabwe and Mozambique.
Yeah.
But it's a weird situation because now you're taking the fences down. The fences were helping with the anti-poaching. So now you're opening it up to poaching more, but you allowing the natural cycle of wildlife. So it's a very complicated situation.
Yeah, it's a big catch-22. And then you've got different countries that operate in different ways. That's why the Ailey's and Bots have stayed in Bots.
Yes.
They know if they leave and go to Zim, they're going to get shot at. They know if they go south, it's not going to work because it's South Africa. We're overdeveloped. Our only natural areas are fenced areas.
Yes.
The rest are primarily farmlands and agricultural lands where you're also going to get pested and annoyed.
Exactly. And in Angola, there's all the landmines and bombs and stuff like that.
And ancestry were hunted as well. And then in Mozambique, if you got a Gorongosa on a game drive, and the guides and the people operating there see elephants, they go the other direction. You don't go towards elephants in Gorongosa because during the Civil War, they were hunted and shot at so profusely. These animals have a deep-seated genetic fear of humans in Mozambique. Wow. If you go to Botswana, you can walk 5 meters from an ellie chilled. Ian Kama's reign, poachers was shot on sight. There was no two ways around it. Mozambique, it's a fine. You get slapped in jail or whatever for maybe a week and then you're out again. So there's, opening fences to different areas with different legislation and different things like that. You'd think the animals would start moving naturally, but they smell that border. They cross over into Zim and they know exactly what's happening.
Yes.
Elephants are very smart animals. So that's why they've hung out in Botswana as long as they have. Botswana has over 100,000 plus elephants just in Botswana. And
that's the whole thing why they're now allowing the legal hunting of elephants, because it's actually a good thing, because otherwise the elephants will destroy the total ecosystem and many other species will die off because of it. So it's, as you said, it's a catch-22.
It is a big catch-22. And again, you say good thing, but it's like, unfortunately, you've got in government, you've got certain priorities. People are like human health resources, economy, and then environment comes last.
Yeah.
If we were to flip that whole thing and put the environment first, so many things would kind of cascade naturally down.
Yes.
Why can't we repopulate areas where elephants were previously extinct? Because it's too expensive. But people are willing to go to flippin' Mars and pay for ridiculous space shuttles to go do something that we don't need right now. We need to save Mother Earth. We need to protect this planet.
Well, we need to fix the problems here and not move to a different planet, because if you move there, the same issues are going to happen. And on Earth, we're blessed with the best ecosystem. We don't have to create a new life. You don't have to all genetically modify all these different species to be able to survive on a different planet.
Yeah. And if we go there, we're no longer human beings with the amount of radiation we'd go through. We would become aliens by living up there anyway. So we wouldn't be Earth people anymore.
Don't know about you, but I ain't leaving Earth. I'm
happy with all the people there that can leave, and I'll just stick back here and enjoy where we are right now.
I hear you. Yeah. And then we can work towards saving the planet, because the planet is actually, it's very good at healing itself.
That's it.
But we got to let it do that. And all it takes is time. Yeah. But time is money. Yeah. And that's the big issue. Yeah. Money is a big thing.
Yeah. Logging, deforestation, people always talking about, poaching and anti-poaching and a single species. But in terms of biodiversity loss, it's chopping down the rainforests. It's trawling what we're doing in the oceans. I've stopped eating fish recently after watching that documentary
on Netflix. That was an amazing...
I knew it. I already had it in the back of my mind. And all we need to do, like you said, is if we can allocate 30% as MPAs, marine protected areas where people are not allowed to fish, go in, do anything, zero impact.
Yes.
We would be able to... It's a natural fish farm. It's the best fish farm you have in the world.
Exactly.
Is the ocean itself. So if we leave these massive pockets alone, the competition will get so high that the little guys will slowly have to swim out because the big territorial fish will chase them out, and we catch that off catch. So you're never crushing core populations.
Yes.
And if we can get to that point where we can literally allocate, like Steve, that's why Australia is doing so well in terms of protecting. Steve Irwin and the family owns a massive percentage of Australia that has been completely allocated to wildlife preserves. And we need more and more of that on this planet. More and more and more. Just if you've got lots of money, just buy pockets of land just that can be left alone.
That's the thing. And then if we do it right, we can actually feed off of that land and live off the land too, because that's what we're made to do. Not this agriculture that's mass production of everything, because that's bad for the environment. You're killing all the ecology off, all the microorganisms. You're destroying the soil, everything just by the way we farm. If we implement like the permaculture ways,
agroforestry,
exactly that. Let nature be nature, and we like reap the fruit of that.
Totally. So I mean, when I was on an expedition, actually pre-COVID, just before COVID, I was in an expedition in Sumatra, North Sumatra, with OIC, Orangutan Information Center, and at a lush forest, which is the tour operator who took us out there. And it was all about permaculture and agroforestry, and giving people a means to, if you're poor, you just take what you've got available to be able to make money, which is the palm oil industry. So people buy little pieces of land and they plant palm oil. And after a few years, that land is dead, the palm oil forest dies, and then you've got your land is completely arid and barren. You can't grow anything. Now, what they're doing is they're buying up pieces of land alongside the Lucia ecosystem. Now, it's completely government owned, and people are not scared to go into the forest and rape and pillage and poach and do what they need to do. So they're buying off pieces of land that's private, and then in that private section, you're planting durian, and you're planting very high quality fruits. I'm forgetting the other species, but they're doing agroforestry principles where it's 3-4 indigenous plants, local forest plants, and then you plant a banana tree, and then another 3-4 trees, and then a durian, and then some jackfruit. And then you go into the forest, and that tree is going to give you, for the next 300-400 years, is going to continuously give you fruit. And you go into the forest, you're collecting what you need, but then you're also providing the animals like orangutans, etc., who will take 15-20% of your fruit. But you only need so much.
Exactly.
And you've got then a long-term basis of food coming from your 100 jackfruit, your 100 durian trees, your granadilla, instead of your palm oil plantation, which is going to last you 5 years, and then that land is completely dead for the next 10.
Yes, because it's draining everything in it.
Completely.
And if you let nature be nature, the leaves fall. It gives nutrients back to the earth. Yeah. The little microfauna break it up and reuse it. The mycelium, like everything works together. It's such a perfect ecosystem that we just got to learn how to be a part of it and not be apart from it. Yeah. And just, I think how we live life has got to change in a big way.
Totally.
That instant generation of let's get this here and now. Yeah. It's not good. No, it's not. Getting mangoes in flippin' winter. Yeah. It's not meant to be like that.
Totally.
You don't change nature. Just let it set its course.
Yeah. So it's eating local again. It's like I have this conversation quite often with, your extreme vegans and vegetarians. And when I was living in London, if I go to the grocery store and I want to make a salad with 10 ingredients, tomatoes are from Morocco, mealies from South Africa, avocados from Mexico. So you go to 10 countries in your salad, pretty much.
Yeah.
If I bought some potatoes and a pig that was killed down in Sussex, that's more vegan, that's more carbon free than me eating my salad with 10 ingredients that has been packaged in plastic, shipped around the world with 50% waste. So there's a big catch in terms of, are we going to move away from milk industry? I'm not condoning the milk industry because it's, again, anything, like you said, big monoculture, anything that's mass produced, stay away from. If you can eat local, there's nothing wrong with eating meat, as long as it's locally sourced.
That's why in South Africa we have the saying, local is lekker.
Yeah.
Lekker means
there
like good, great, or I don't know how to explain it to someone who's not...
Good. Lekker is like, it's, you're benefiting, everyone benefits. It's kind of a more sustainable, holistic kind of approach.
And that's the thing, like there's nothing wrong with being vegan and that.
No, not at all.
But if you being vegan because you love animals and you feel like eating meat is actually destroying the planet, no. Generally speaking, you're destroying the planet more by consuming plant-based foods just because of the way we farm and everything like that. It's not sustainable whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It's destroying other things. You're destroying more wildlife by not eating animals.
Yeah. So if you were to be able to, in South Africa, obviously it's not the perfect system, but we have a lot of, if everything was government run, we would have no wildlife. But because of the privatized industry of wildlife and game breeders, we have often an excess of wildlife in these fenced off areas, and they need a certain amount of culling a year.
Yes.
These animals run around completely free, are eating what they want to eat up until the moment that they get shot.
Yes.
And if you can then source one of those impala a year and you freeze the meat, that is completely vegan in my eyes, as opposed to importing almond milk, importing, Mexican cartel mafia avocados.
Yeah.
It's really looking at the choices you make in terms of how you're purchasing and what you're purchasing.
Yes.
I think we can make big changes by just eating what's available. Like you say, if it's not mango season, it's not mango season. You don't get mangoes. Simple.
Exactly.
It's like, I want my mango. And it's shipped in all the way from Indonesia or wherever it's shipped in from. And it's coming again from a massive mango plantation where there's no undershrubbery. So it's all kind of pesticides and insecticides and and over-hormonized and GMO food. And I mean, if you look at what's happening with India, it's shocking, what Monsanto has done with their seed in India, where, for 3-4 years, they've got the biggest crops, and the 4th year, their land is dead. And what do you do then?
Yeah.
It's very short-sighted. There's no long-term plan in terms of people, and a lot of governments are never looking long-term.
Exactly. It's about the biggest buck now that you can make. It's that instantaneous generation again. Also, we don't need to eat different things every day. Yes, you can have chicken today. You finish that chicken or whatever. You slaughter a cow or a wildebeest. You eat that till it's finished. You don't
totally
have different things all the time just because you feel like it. You eat the fruit of the season.
100%.
Type of thing, yeah.
Eating local.
Local is lacquer.
Local is lacquer. There we go. We go.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. I actually like how we've diverged from the whole reptile topics.
Totally.
Because this is something that's
it's super pertinent. It's very important. Yeah.
It's very, very important. Trawlers, we got to stop that altogether, because line fishing is way better for the environment. I'm not saying stop eating fish completely, but think of how you're doing it. And all those brands that say, oh no, we are eco-friendly, sustainable or whatever, there's a lot more behind that than what meets the eye.
Totally. I mean, the green facing is a big business, hey? Add a vegan slap, add a vegan sticker or ethically sourced sticker, and people are willing to pay 3-4 times the amount, and people have realized that. So that's like farm bread or farm whatever. It's all rubbish.
It's all about, it's a money-making scheme.
Yeah.
A lot of it's not actually about caring for the environment and the world we live on. Mm. It's sad.
Yeah, it's very sad.
So now let's diverge back to reptiles again. Does keeping reptiles in captivity impact the wild in a negative or positive way?
Wow, it's a very complex and convoluted
we can go on just this topic alone.
So I'll try my best not to ruffle any feathers and give what I think of the situation. Obviously, keeping animals in captivity has its benefits to a degree. But I think prior to this whole change in consciousness where we're going, and people are more wanting to go out and experience things in the wild, before it was literally cool, I want to keep as many snakes as I can. Yes, it's going to benefit in terms of people are saying, but if they're endangered in the wild, if I bring them into captivity, I'm going to be able to save that species at a later stage. Rubbish. It's never going to happen.
Because you can't really reintroduce it back into the wild if there's no wild left.
If there's no wild left, firstly, and then why are we putting our efforts in the thought, okay, cool, let's collect all the wild ones and then put money and resources into a captive breeding project instead of allocating all that energy to in the wild. Cool, let's find that pocket of wildlife or find that patch of forest and try and protect it. Go to these poachers and people who are poaching them from the wild for the captive trade and turn them into guys who are going to do snake safaris. We've had plenty of experiences with this in Uganda, people who were previously poachers are now actually taking people out on snake safaris and realizing that if they keep poaching in this area, there's going to be no snakes left. And if they now are literally, cool, I've got a pair of snakes, they keep them in an enclosure, and they breed, let's say, some gaboons and rhino vipers. 70% of them they put back into the wild, and the 25 they send over to Europe and America.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do, because...
And then to be able to... So I used to be just about keeping snakes because I wanted to keep the snake and I want to look at the snake. And now it's more really... Because we're never going to stop the pet trade. The pet trade is massive.
Yes.
There's an incredible documentary on water bear called Not a Pet. I mean, out of all the exotics in the world, I think 60% of the exotics is amphibians and reptiles.
Just because the mass
it's
amount
it's
of
easy
keeping
to
all
keep,
of them.
and people like the whole exoticness of it all. And once let's say now we've got protected species in a country, once they leave that country and they arrive in Europe, it's open game. There's no legislation around who you can sell to, where you can ship the animal to, etc., etc.
And a lot of them end up with people who cannot even care for them. So
Yeah.
then those animals die off and
Yeah.
they keep importing more,
Yeah.
which just keeps feeding the problem.
It's a big, big problem. So it's like, how did the Borneo earless monitors get into the captive trade if there were never any permits or anything allowed for removing them from the wild in Indonesia?
Same with what Fiji banded
Yeah,
iguanas
yeah.
and the Bolian's python, I
yeah.
believe.
And then people will go on and say, oh, it's farm bred. It's like this nice, it's like the whole eco, like vegan stamp, you know? It's like someone who owns a piece of land in the rainforest and they found the snake on his thing, so that's considered farm bred. It's a wild animal that he just collected from his property. And it's very destructive what's happening in terms of the captive population. It's all interlinked, from like the drug cartels to prostitution to the illegal wildlife trade. And the movement of the amount of animals, it's scary. People are always thinking in the captive, there's still plenty of gaboons and rhinos in the wild. I'm like, have you been?
Yeah.
Have you been to these rainforests in Uganda? Have you been to the rainforests in Kenya? These are tiny fragmented pockets. And you look for days. When I mean days, we're in herp crews of 4 or 5 people with 2 local guides who know the area intimately. And you're lucky to find 1 or 2. So these animals are really under big, big, big pressure. And unfortunately, there's also, I want these snakes. And a lot of people are very willing to buy captive bred snakes. Even captive bred bread, so the CBB, you know.
F2 or whatever.
Exactly. But now there's also a big community in Czech Republic. Czech Republic has a big problem. It's one of the hubs where a lot of...
I think it's the smuggling hub.
The smuggling hub from Africa into Europe.
Yeah.
And a lot of keepers there, they don't actually want captive bred. They would way rather, they want wild blood, wild genetics.
Because the people that are breeding in captivity are breeding the daughter to the father to the son, back and forth, messing up the bloodlines, giving you funny looking animals and weak genetics.
Yeah. So these guys are very willing to buy 10 individual wild caught, fully knowing that 6 are going to die and 4 will survive. And this trade will continue going on and on and on unless we change people's mind on the ground, these guys that are collecting the snakes, and let them know that if they... there's snake safaris happening all around the world now. There's big companies taking people all around the world, photographic safaris for snakes. There's somehow this weird increase in energy and vibe around snakes and reptiles around the world in a good way. And I believe, why keep snakes captively nowadays? If you enjoy them that much, why not save up and go and see them in the wild?
Yes.
Why not give these people and poachers an avenue where if we have enough people arrive and be like, dude, I will pay you $500 for the next week to go see snakes in the wild. That guy will stop poaching immediately. He doesn't want to be poaching.
Yeah, because the wild caught animals, it takes them days and days to find because the terrain's not easy to find. And the longer you do it, the less animals that are out there to actually find. And now, I don't know if you've ever seen those price lists or whatever of how much the animals sell for, but like a wild ball python is like $5, $2.
They're still collecting ball pythons from the wild. There's captive populations pretty much, I would say, in every country in the world, bar Antarctica.
Yes.
There's ball pythons and people breeding ball pythons. Why do people still need to... it's one of the hardest snakes to find in the wild in terms of a python in Africa. It's one of the hardest in the world.
Wow.
You can't find them.
Yeah,
There's like
the
little
most common
tiny
in
pockets of them.
captivity.
Yeah, and it's the most common snake in captivity, and yet people still want to get them from the wild.
That's the thing. There's no need anymore because literally with ball pythons we have enough genetic diversity. But then again, it's a lot of the way we are keeping them needs to change drastically and soon because we are destroying things. You cannot breed siblings and stuff together for generation after generation after generation.
Yeah.
Yes, with reptiles it's not as bad as the inbreeding with mammals, but that goes to an extent.
Sure.
We don't need to breed this to get a fancy morph quicker than before or whatever.
Yeah.
Or bring in wild blood because maybe I can get a wild type morph from that.
Sure.
No, just leave them there. Let them do what they were meant to do in the wild and go see them there because I don't know about you, but when I see snakes in the wild,
there's nothing better.
It's amazing.
It's nothing better.
And that's why I love keeping also South African species because I can see them in the wild. I can recreate that habitat, or try to the best of my ability, and then also try and get that pressure from collecting them in the wild off. Yes, some species may be abundant in the wild. That doesn't mean we should take them out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a species is only abundant until the demand booms. There's like Bolian's pythons now. It's like the new hot holy grail of pythons.
Yeah.
I saw a pair being sold now for $22,000. It's like a couple of years ago they were selling for maybe $3,000-$4,000. Now, because it's become this whole rainbow serpent, it's got this big allure to it. Now you can imagine if people are willing to pay $22,000 for a pair of snakes, and that word gets to local catchers in Indonesia.
Yeah, that can make
that can decimate a population very, very quickly. So
because the reality is people do need money to survive, and if they see that, they're like, okay, that's easier than it's probably more than a full year or 2 years worth of wages by just finding one snake. So what are you going to do to feed your family? I would also do that.
100%.
That's why we got to change the way.
And that's again what brings you back to your question initially, is like, what's the captive population, or what's the captive breeding that's going to help? Is stem the demand, because people will take the easier route. If there are captive breds available, people will go that route, and then the wild populations can be saved to a degree. You know, if there's still some new blood that needs to be brought in every once in a while, that's going to be your bigger breeders. And let's say 5-10 individuals are leaving the wild from, let's say, Bolian's pythons, for example, but there's already 15-20 captive breeders that are managing to breed them regularly. Then you only need to bring in every couple of years some fresh blood, and not be bringing in to actually supply the demand of all the captive babies that people are buying.
Exactly. And know where those animals are caught. So then you can release, per se, 70% of what you've bred in captivity too. Because then you can also take out for generations 200, 300 years in the future, because the different bloodlines are breeding with each other, but also not mixing and putting them in the wrong locality, you know, where they come from. So you release them where their parents were caught, or whatever. Do something like that.
I don't think that would ever really be possible unless you're on the ground. Like you said, you know, if these animals are leaving to Europe and leaving to America, you're never going to be able to know who bred what and what he did with those animals. So I think if there's always going to be a system in place where Bolian's pythons in Indonesia, rhino vipers and gaboons in Uganda, if you have those guys that are registered and legally allowed to export X amount a year, then those guys and those farms are going to breed them. 70% of the hatchlings go straight back into the wild. There's no contamination. They were raised in that area, in that country, and they can be going straight back. And that 30% is supplying then America and the pet trade with fresh blood.
That's actually a much better idea than the people
the captives. I mean, the legislation and the red tape to move a snake, to be able to get it from America back into Indonesia, back to the locality, the stress on the animal already is going to be extreme. Then the pathogens and all the different things that come into play.
Introducing new things into the wild.
So if there's ever going to be a system in place for it, it'll be the guys on the ground who've got legal paperwork. Like in Uganda, there are collectors that are legally allowed to. Again, it's like the government allows them. In my eyes, it's not a beneficial thing because they're being given free license. But there are legal routes to go around it.
Yes.
And if those guys are properly licensed and are properly educated around the fact that, cool, you guys have these big enclosures, 70%, or even say, let's say 50% go back to the wild. I mean, a gaboon can have 50, 60 babies. So if you're releasing 50% back to the wild and the rest goes to the pet trade, and you're constantly using one parent or a couple parent groups that you re-release after a couple of years, and then you catch another captive pair, so you're changing the bloodlines, I think that would be the best route to be able to supply the pet trade, which is never going to stop. We're never going to stop people keeping animals, unfortunately.
But then again, there is a benefit to us humans as well as the wildlife for keeping. Like,
yes.
I know lots of people that their animals actually literally give them life. Otherwise, without them, they would be suffer from severe depression, many other things, even physical ailments they help with. It's crazy. So
it's a peaceful thing. It's something that's beautiful, you know. And again, it also, having snakes in captivity and doing snake shows, that's what stems intrigue and love. You know, being able to touch a snake for the first time, it's not going to be in the wild.
Yeah.
You're going to be with someone like me or you come home and like, oh, do you like snakes? Oh, I'm a bit scared. Oh, don't be scared. Come with me in my snake room. First 5-10 minutes, Oaks, people like on edge. Okay, I'm going to take a snake out. Just be calm. And after half an hour, these people's ridiculous inert fears completely dissipate. And all of a sudden, they're touching a snake. I had a guy I went to school with, very, very intriguingly, very heavily Zulu. His whole family had never even touched a snake. It's the biggest taboo. He got to the point where he got comfortable enough with me that he was touching the snake, eventually holding the snake. And he's like, you know what, I want to kiss the snake. And so I held the snake's head and I like move over the body. He's like, no, I want to kiss the snake on the head. As like this very like ceremonious kind of like overcoming his fear. And after he kissed the snake, it was this huge elation. And he went back to his family and spoke to his family about this incredible experience he had that none of his family had ever experienced.
Wow.
Because of this inert fear that most people have of snakes. And it's normal. I mean, back in the day, you know, if you look at how we evolved naturally, you know, snakes back in the day, if you got bit by any of these snakes before medical advancements arrived, you were dead.
Yes.
So there is a natural, normal fear of this. Add a little bit of religion into the spice, you know, with Adam and Eve and the snake being evil.
Yes.
And then some bad movies, and then you have
whole
one of the biggest
also.
phobias in the world is snakes and spiders. People are petrified of them, but it doesn't take long, you know, before you get a little bit of knowledge and you can speak to a few people. I mean, even locals, we go for mamba calls, they're running the other direction. An hour later, they're willing to stand there next to you, slowly touch the snake, squeeze a little bit. You know, it's not slimy. You're like, no, it's not. The snakes aren't slimy creatures,
yes.
You know. So it's a lot about education and knowledge. And, you know, fear only exists in the absence of knowledge.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's why the more you know, the less you fear. You gotta be up close and be personal with it to see, oh, it's not what I thought it was. It's not what people have said, because there are so many myths and stories can get bent and twisted so easily and so quickly. Oh, I know somebody who was chased by this, and then the story keeps changing and evolving to become something it was not at all, because everybody knows somebody who knows somebody that's had a bad experience.
Story.
Yeah. And you know, it's like that game you play as kid. Yeah. The words never come out.
30 centimeter snake turns into a 3 meter one. The color changed, the head shape changed, everything's changed. And at the end, it's like, oh, it was a 4 meter anaconda in Johannesburg. You're like, really? Come on.
Exactly. I've had that so often. It's not even funny, but it is funny for us,
sure.
But then again, we can't laugh at that because we got to educate and show. No, it's not actually like that. It's like this, and give that up close experience. That's why I love my ball pythons. They've gotten so many people over the fear of snakes who are like, I won't even come in your house now because there's a snake. What is it gonna do to you?
Yeah.
Just check. They incredible animals. They're not gonna do anything to you.
Does your camera keep rolling?
Yeah,
okay.
It's proper.
Mine's got a 28 cutoff point. 28 minutes, it stops.
No, so this goes to like 30 minutes, and then it just does
it will tick over. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But they all stitch together perfectly.
Perfect.
So, what are some of the difficulties herping and finding reptiles out in the wild?
Sure. I mean, it's again. So finding snakes in the wild is not an easy task.
Oh,
again, it's like.
No.
People think, you know, snakes are everywhere. And I can assure you, we go looking for them for hours and hours and hours, and you cannot find a snake.
Days.
Yeah, days even. And it depends on the habitat and the environment and certain cues. But yeah, you really need to be in tune to find snakes. Certain species like your elapids, your group of elapids, cobras, mambas, things like that, out there actually actively herping, they're too in tune. They hear your vibrations, that snake's on the path. It's done its job wrong if it gets seen.
Yeah.
So you're very lucky to go out herping and actually herp a mamba, herp a cobra, things like that. Once you go into like desert environments, searching for your dwarf adders, it becomes a little bit easier. You know, you can get
even
lucky.
Though it's a rarer snake, it's easier to find just because of the behavior of the animal.
Yeah, and because they don't move a lot, they're isolated to certain ridge lines, you can really kind of isolate their habitat. Google Maps is your biggest friend.
Oh, yes.
You look around and you search and you can see, okay, there's a little rock belt there, it's east facing, and then you search those areas. And you flip enough rocks and you flip enough things and you eventually find something.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's really not easy. Rainforest's a really tough place to work in.
Tell me about it.
I mean, you're sludging through, there's lots of mud. A lot of the snakes are either 2-3 meters in the canopy. They look like the canopy.
Yes.
They look
and
like
there's nothing to flip.
Yeah, it's a really tough environment to herp in the rainforests. And it's also tough to get through places. You know, I I love the rainforest, but I also very much like a Northern Cape kind of habitat.
Yeah.
Vast openness, you can see everywhere you want to go, and you can easily operate there. But yeah, finding snakes is not easy. We just did a Kenya trip now for 3.5 weeks. Of that was probably 3 weeks of active herping, and we found 16 species of snake. I think 20 individuals in total. So that's still decent going. I mean, in African standards, it's also, you got to remember, African standards, there's a lot less diversity in terms of Africa because of the shrinkage of the Congo Basin and the rainforest.
Yeah.
It kept shrinking over millennia. It shrunk and then got bigger again, shrunk and got bigger. So there's a lot less diversity and a lot less density. If you go into your tropics, Costa Rica and Indonesia, Thailand, you don't know what to do with yourself. There's literally like frog there, then there's another snake, and then there's nothing there, and you don't know what to film and where to stop. So it depends a lot where you're going in different areas, like Costa Rica, and a lot of those areas have got very well-established herping tours because they can actually confirm we will see stuff. We will see stuff. If you go out herping for rarer stuff here in Africa, I mean, I did a 7-day trip looking for albanica, and I think we walked over in 7 days just under 400-500 kilometers walking.
That's insane.
And only on the last day did we end up getting some snakes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like the tropics, like the catch-22. You go in the tropics and you see a snake around every corner or every like couple of hours. The thrill is there. But when you do that 4-day search for a species of snake and then you finally pop it,
there's nothing better.
You've put in those hours, you've grinded out, and then you finally find the snakes. You find herpetologists dancing very hard in the field.
Yeah, that's where the saying "lifer" comes from.
Yeah.
That's a lifer right there.
Yeah, 100%.
I know it like searching for our East African gaboons, and that's not even full tropics. Every year I go for 7 days, every day out there, day in, day out, searching. Nothing. It's been 5 years, so like 5 total weeks out there. Nothing, not found one. But then again, some of your most avid herpers and that have never found it. It's, you also got to kind of get lucky, and it's not an easy environment because you can't just flip a rock and find stuff. They aren't really rocks. It's leaves, it's bushes, it's you see a lot of other cool stuff. So it's still worth it because you're having a great time in the beautiful environment.
Yeah, but now you're also talking about a snake that's heavily poached. So a lot of these snakes. It's a very strange habitat as well for gaboons, considering where you find them all the way up into Uganda and slightly on the coast in Tanzania, up into the Usambaras, and then a little patch in Kakamega Forest in Kenya, which is the most easterly pocket of like primary rainforest. And you look at like our St. Lucia, very coastal estuary area, and you've got these gaboons living in that area. Yeah. I mean, coastal thicket is not an easy place to work in. It's really hectic. We were looking for mambas now in Watamu up in Kenya. I think we had 6 days looking for mambas, green mambas. It's gnarly, man. Like shirts torn, scratches everywhere. You pushing through stuff to be able to get to the prime habitat. And I think 6 days, no mamba, unfortunately.
And that's the thing. You're so surrounded by bush that you can't see anything.
You're more focused on getting through the bush than actually having time to look around and see what's around you.
Yeah. And if you do see something, because there's like rainforest thicket everywhere, you're probably not going to catch it because those animals,
they move.
That's their environment. They can dart through it like lightning.
So, I mean, we had one guy, Ferry, from Bioken. If you guys are ever in Kenya, please do hit up Bioken. They're absolutely incredible. Do snake safaris. And this man is a jungle ninja. I swear. He asked me a few times, so Ferry, you see that tree like 3-4 meters up, big mango tree? It's like, if you see a mamba there, you're going to catch it. No problem. These guys, I mean, since he was a little boy, around 6, 7, 8 years old, his dad was working at the snake farm. Yeah. With Royan still at the time.
Okay. Because he passed away a
few years ago, unfortunately. And he was a little boy, and his dad was working at the farm, and he used to come to the snake farm board as a little kid, 6, 7 years old. And from that moment onwards, he's been working at Bioken as a snake rescuer and snake safari guide for the last 20 years. Wow. I mean, the guy is... It's something about people who've worked with snakes in the field their whole lives, that they just look at something and they see it instantly. It's like, there's a mamba up there. You're like, what?
Yeah.
You look for a little while, he sees it
Even
straight
for
away.
someone who's been...
Yeah,
like-
even for guys, I've been herping now for... I mean, I didn't know it was herping until herping became a thing for me.
Yeah, you were just looking for snakes.
So I went to my class, and at my class there was actually a snake community. We had a snake room.
Okay.
And by second year, I was already managing the snake room, and I was the kid out rescuing because all the teachers were living on the property, and they had coal bins where they keep your wood in there for the winter because winter gets really cold. Well, all the snakes, every winter there were snakes in there, from puff adders, olive house snakes, red-lipped heralds, night adders. We had green bush or spotted bush snakes. We had the Natal eastern green snakes, runcoals. I mean, I was rescuing at least minimum of like maybe 50, 60 snakes a year by the age of 15, 16.
Wow.
And I did that for the next 3-4 years at school. So I was very involved in snakes without even like knowing that I was out herping. It was just kind of what I did.
But then again, that's like totally different to finding them in their environment.
Totally.
It's a lot easier finding a snake that's coming to someone.
It's an easy cheat, yeah.
Exactly.
It's like you know they're going to be warm and comfy. It's like if you want to actively herp an area you know you're going to go back to. A lot of people do it in the States. You just lay out boards.
Yeah.
Lay out boards and you lay out a couple things and then you
flip
flip stuff because you know the snakes want a warm, cozy place to sit under. Otherwise, you're literally looking for the proverbial needle in the haystack. You know, there's grass everywhere and you want to try and look through it. It's impossible.
Because that's what they were designed to do,
Yeah.
to stay away
Yeah.
from the predators. And we
100%.
are
Yeah.
a predator. I remember going up to the Timbavati one time and we had this incredible guide called Given. And he would go like this at night. We're driving like 60 k's an hour on dirt roads in the Landy. And he's shining like this. You can't even see what he's shining at because the torch is just going back and forth. And he's like, stop. So you stop. Oh, there. 40 meters away, there's a chameleon there. You're like, where?
Yeah.
40 meters away, there's a chameleon. He spots it at night, but with shining a torch like a madman through the bushes. And then you go up, you walk close and like, wow.
System to the madness. It's like he knows what
Exactly.
he's doing, dude.
Yeah, Shanghai.
Yeah.
Trackers like that.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, very cool. Local knowledge is always the best. I mean, if you get to an area, locals will always speak to them and they ask them, have you seen this snake? No, I haven't seen this one, but we've seen that one. And they straight away will tell you, you'll know if there's a pocket. Like when we were looking for Worthing Tony now, certain areas the guys were busy working in, they said they'd never seen the snake. We went 10 to 15 kilometers to the other side, another ridge line on another edge of property of a different farm, and they said they saw them regularly. So just because of a slight change in area, these guys were seeing Bitters Worthing Tony and the other guys weren't.
Wow. So is Worthing Tony like endangered or vulnerable species?
Yes.
What's it classified as?
There's 3 endemic species to Kenya, which were high on my target list to go and see. The one is Monthatheris hindi, the montane viper, which is still quite stable in terms of they live up in the moorlands of Mount Kenya.
Okay.
But I think the nearest thing or biggest threat right now, weirdly enough, they're not actually kept in captivity. No one wants them, even though there's this super rare kind of very unique species of snake.
Wait till one person gets it, then everybody else is.
I didn't say anything, guys. Don't go looking for them.
Exactly, don't.
And then there's the other 2, which is the Mount Kenya bush viper, or Ash's bush viper, Atheris dysykes. They're being heavily hit with the poaching. Poaching and deforestation is a very big issue for those snakes. They only got elevated, so the current field guide for East African reptiles they're unclassified. But just after that got published, they got moved up to CITES 2.
Oh, wow.
So they are being protected now at the moment. And there's not a lot of areas where they still exist. And the southern forests of Mount Kenya, and then a couple little fragmented patches east of Mount Kenya. But a couple groups have gone recently. Actually, 2 guys that were with us, Robin and Sam Vesey. They went on a trip just before we arrived to go look for the snake. And they met up with a couple people like, we want to go look for Mount Kenya bush viper. They're like, 100% we can go find them. We poach them. If we find the snake, we're going to keep it. Very openly talking, like they're very proud to be poaching the snake. So very bitter and weird experience. They really actually didn't like the experience and actually left. A previous group as well, a French group, also went through about a couple months, I think it was the beginning of the year, to go look for Mount Kenya bush viper, and same situation. They pretty much were almost working alongside poachers to be able to try and see the snake in the wild, and they were still kind of saying, we're going to keep the snake if we find it. So really, really tough. I mean, it's again down to the pet trade demand for these incredibly beautiful snakes, probably one of the most beautiful snakes in the Arcturus genus. And it was the same again when Matilda got split from Ceratophrora, and it's the new bigger species of this horned kind of viper.
Yeah.
The demand went through the roof. So these poor species of snake, population loss or habitat destruction for deforestation, as well as pet collection. I mean, these snakes, if they don't get much help in the next couple of years, they're going to go extinct in the wild.
And that's sad because people keep bringing them in because also, like with those species, not much is known on how to care for them
Not
or
at
anything
all.
like that. It's
Not
basically
at all.
trial and error, which is sad because you can find out a lot if you go to their habitat where they come from.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's like a species like Hispida. Hispida, the hairy bush viper, probably the holy grail
Yes.
if you speak to people who keep Arcturus or bush vipers. Extraordinarily difficult snake to keep alive. There's, I think, one report of someone who's managed to keep them alive. The rest all just die.
yeah,
We're missing so many different like climatic changes or diet preferences or kind of very small nuances in the snake's biology that we can't pinpoint. And we keep importing them and they just keep dying. People keep
Yes.
them alive for 6 months and they die. It's like, why are we still importing them? Just
Exactly.
leave them in the wild.
yes. And if you have to do something about that, do like a full-on research paper.
Yeah.
Find out how they're living in the wild. Go find one in the wild. Follow it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Track it.
Yeah.
Live in the bush with it.
Yeah.
See what the climate is. Take all the readings and that. And then maybe you'll be able to keep it alive in captivity
Yeah.
because we can't just... There's not an endless supply of
No.
wild animals
No.
out there. Why do you think Bitis nasicornis, your rhino viper, they were everywhere a few years ago,
Yeah.
and then now they're nowhere.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to get, and most of the places have closed imports, which is good because you can't keep poaching them, but that also rises the poaching level.
Yeah, rises the poaching level, and then it's also, different localities. I mean, I was with 2 guys now in Kenya, and their knowledge of these species, Arcturus and Bitis, is literally through the roof. I mean, I had conversations with them 2-3 hours at a time about, like I was saying, the small nuances on changes in climatic conditions. Like we spoke about it before the podcast about kind of getting an idea of how to keep rhinos in captivity. And I mean, there's nighttime drops in Kakamega. Let's say the Kakamega, which is your Kenyan population. The nighttime drops in that forest is down to 12 degrees at night.
Yeah.
No one in captivity will drop their rhinos down to 12 degrees at night. People would be too scared for that. Then your Ugandan population, far happier with a more heated environment, a lot more humid environment. And then your West African is again it's almost like different animals that you got to treat in different ways. And if you don't know where your snake is coming from and you've just bought it as a wild import, you've got no clue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes it very, very difficult to even try because it's not like a trial and error thing. If you have an error, the animal can die and you might not be able to get ever again.
Yeah.
So,
it's like you said, we used to have a lot of rhino vipers coming through the expos here.
Yes.
And now since the restrictions, no one's managed to breed them.
yeah, no. I know of one guy who has a rhino viper that he's kept for over 10 years.
Okay.
And how he's done it is exactly how you're talking.
Okay.
Letting it have the nice nighttime drops, cool, has a breeze, humidity isn't wet. People think rainforest, so they think wet. No. Have you ever herped out in a rainforest? It's humid, but there's always that breeze, and then there's different levels. The soil ecology has a big thing to do with it as well. It's got a nice amount of drainage, yet it keeps the humidity, and then there's the leaf litter. It's very, very complex. And then in the shade, it's always freezing, but the sun is like boiling.
And these snakes know how to use their environment in the perfect way,
Yeah, because that's what they adapted for.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Incredible. I mean, to see these snakes, it's in the wild. There's nothing better. Really, nothing better.
No, there's not. But it's very difficult to like find stuff. I was just out now, also on a herping trip while you just got back, and finding stuff. You walk for hours searching for stuff, and generally you won't see anything. You won't see your target species, no matter how much good intel you have of where they were last seen or anything like that. Sometimes it just comes down to things happen when they happen, and it seems like if you're a reptile person looking for snakes, you're not going to find them.
It's so true. You see the people who get the most ridiculous observations, like the Mozambique spitting cobra who was trying to chew on that the large plated lizard or something on the road the other day. It's always people who don't look out for snakes, who see the most male mamba combat. Oh, there's some mambas in my back garden. They're busy breeding. No, they're not breeding. They're fighting. Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. And all the herpers pull in, and then they're gone already by the time you get there.
Yeah, and we don't get to see all those amazing sightings. Or that snouty trying to eat that rock monitor.
Yeah, jeez. Yeah.
And then that worm slung going for the chameleon. There's so many cool sightings. But what's nice is pretty much everyone has a phone in their hand and records it. So we still get to see it. For
databasing, it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. For if you want to submit your stuff, you can submit it to like iNaturalist also and help study these animals just by what you've seen alone. But it's strange how us herpers don't always get the great experiences, even though we like spend our lifetime trying to get them.
Yeah, and then that brings it back, right time, right place with a lot of luck.
Exactly. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
You just got back from Kenya. What were the other main species that you were looking for? You said the green mambas, the Atheris, and the Withingtoni.
Yeah. So we went through to Kenya. I'm often working alongside Living Zoology. Living Zoology are an incredible YouTube channel. They've really become kind of the forerunners of natural history documentation of snakes and reptiles, specifically snakes. And they had a certain target species list. I mean, obviously, we try to see as many snake species as possible. But our main target, we started off on the coastline in Watamu, collaborating with Bioken, or now to be known as East African Venom Supply. Oh, wow. Yeah, they're busy rebranding and moving away from the Bioken name and to kind of really focus on what they're doing. And we were there to try and find green mambas, as well as any black mamba call-outs. They've got ashes, spitting cobras there as well as all your green snakes, speckled green snakes. You've got your batters bees. And, I mean, we ended up... This is an incredible story. We went out herping actively, and... somehow Mache and Ferry, they're busy looking inside like a squirrel hole, had a little bit of fluff and whatnot. And I think it was our third day out herping for green mambas. And Ferry pokes his little tiny hook stick inside the squirrel hole to see what's maybe in there. And out pops out an Usambara vine snake. Literally just fell out the hole. We're like, what on earth is an Usambara vine snake doing sleeping in a squirrel hole? So a lot of species that you think you expect to see, you don't expect to see. And then the ones you don't expect to see, I mean, seeing a vine snake out herping is like, Ferry in his lifetime of 20 years there has seen 10 individuals in the wild. And we got to see one on day 3 by pure chance. So we ended up knocking off a lot of cool species in Watamu. We ended up, which montane egg eater that we worked with, no, that was other side, sorry. The East African egg eater we worked with. Red-beaked snake, we got a rescue call on a red-beaked snake. Black mamba, a little bit more inwards towards Tsavo again. So I think in Watamu we had a really good hotspot of lots of different species. Then it was heading over to Kakamega Forest, which is the last patch of forest in primary forest in Kenya. And that was for rhino vipers and gaboons, of which we didn't find. But we did end up finding a yellow forest snake, which was probably the second or third record for that area ever.
Is that the polymon you're...
No, that's not the polymon.
You're going to go to that.
That's not the polymon, yeah. So that was actually in the same area in Kakamega as well.
Okay.
We went to the one area, we stayed there for the first night, and that was our first night out herping. We kind of just went, before we'd ever touch base with our guide, me and Mache couldn't wait, so we went out for kind of like ninja night herp that evening. We found the yellow forest snake, which is a Homonotus modestus. Very, very rare species of snake, very few records, so that was an incredible find. And then
you get lots of video footage.
Yeah. Video footage, scale counts, headshots, the whole 9 yards.
Nice.
And then we met up with our guide the next day. We went to Rondo Retreat. So if any one of you guys want to head through to Kakamega Forest, Rondo Retreat is absolutely incredible. Right in the middle of the forest, you've got access to all the trails from there, and some amazing guides there as well who are very willing to show you around and have deep knowledge from the butterflies, birds, arthropods, even into reptiles and amphibians. And I think it was on our first walk, he'd given us the introduction and everything. Cool, we've got this and this and this and so many species. And after about half an hour, he literally I wasn't there, I was at the back of kind of lingering back. And he was with Mache and Robin up front. And the guide literally kind of was like, I'm just going to walk in here. And he literally walks 5 meters off the path, rustles through some feathers, some like leaf litter, and there's this tiny little centipede eater that we thought at the time. We're like, oh my gosh, centipede eater, amazing. As far as centipede eater, we pull it out. We all still 100% convinced it's centipede eater. So we bag the snake. We can't unfortunately film it at the time, so we bag the snake and then continue with our herp. And we come back after the herping session and we identify and we look at the snake and we're like, it's a polymon. But now the 3 species, there's a Christie's polymon, which occurs in Kakamega forest, but it's a completely black, uniform black snake and quite thick-set snake. And the other 3, which is your fawn-headed, your yellow-collared, and your Gabon snake eaters, are all found like Western Uganda. So it's maybe 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 kilometers away from the nearest record of the species of snake. Wow. So we also, again, did ventral scale pictures and all that stuff, took headshots, etc. I did an amazing video on it as well, which I'll hopefully edit soon. I've got too much editing to do.
Do that one first, please. I got to check it out soon.
Yeah. So I'll try and do the more pertinent ones a little bit sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, potentially a first record of that snake in that area, if not a new species.
Wow.
But
so it's not the species that occurs there and just a young individual that goes through a
ontogenetic color change. So it's definitely not a Christie snake eater. We could check straight away. We even contacted Stephen Sproles and he confirmed it definitely wasn't a Christie snake eater. So it's one of the other 3 species, and again, like
or a new one,
or a subspecies, or I mean, if you read into the guide, a lot of people actually consider the polymon, which is broken up into multiple different species from mostly Central Africa towards West Africa, as one very variable species instead of it being multiple different species. So it's very tough to kind of, okay, cool, are the ones in Gabon does the neck stripe change? Is the Colaris, which has like, there's this one species where it's not like a collar, it's more of a line that runs down its head. The one that we had kind of had a Batman mask kind of vibe going on. So, and again, it's never ever been seen in Kakamega forest. Never been seen, one of these snakes has never been seen in Kenya, full stop. So wow. to try and ascertain as to what species it is, etc., is very, very difficult. I'm not a trained or professional herpetologist. I'm an avid herper. I'm surrounded with people who are herpetologists who have a lot of knowledge, and we were all stumped for a good week, and we still are. We still need to do the ventral scale counts and all that sort of stuff to be able to ascertain if it's a new species or what it might be.
What was that feeling like, knowing that it might be like a world's first or a new species?
Yeah, it's an incredible feeling. It's really like, it's something special to, it's also like, you know, you feel at the time, it was the same with the yellow forest snake, the Homonotus, and then also the snake eater. You've got Mathieu Dolinay and Living Zoology, who he's busy completing his PhD in herpetology. His knowledge of snakes and reptiles around the world is really is incredible. So I learned a hell of a lot from him. And when you have people like that stumped in the field looking at a snake and they're like, I'm not sure what it is. At one point you feel, okay, he doesn't know his stuff. But at the second point, which is the bigger one, it's like, this is incredible that we can find something that you've got 6 herpers standing around who are completely unsure of what species of snake it is.
That's
so
insane.
It's like a real moment of elation where you get back to the lodge and you're just like internet Googling, paging through the book and doing characteristic checks. And you're like, no, it can't be this, but it can't be this, but it's impossible that it's this because these only occur in Uganda. And you're like, what's going on here?
Oh, that must be insane.
Yeah, it's a really cool process to go through, and hopefully we'll get some cool news in the near future about doing some scale counts and stuff on these snakes.
Well, you definitely got to keep us posted.
Yeah, we will.
And
definitely.
if you keep us posted, where can people check that out?
Okay, cool. So obviously Living Zoology, they do a lot of the natural history kind of side of things. So they'll definitely be posting stuff on that quite soon. As well as my channel at Matt Van Geo. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm a little bit more of a kind of explanatory. My kind of goal is to film as many species in their natural habitats as possible and divulge as much information. Living Zoology are very much purely natural history documentation, which is really amazing. They really give all the glory to the species
snakes.
and the snakes itself, and really showing those snakes in their natural habitats, which is what I do as well, except I kind of add myself into the picture.
Okay, yeah. Kind of like myself too.
Yeah, I add a little bit of personality to it, and I want to educate and teach people as much as I can about every snake that occurs in their country or whatever the case might be. So that's kind of my goal right now is, film. I mean, again, it's a pure passion thing for anything else. It's my biggest hobby in the world. Biggest passion is to, firstly, just get to see these snakes in the wild. Secondly, I'm a filmmaker, so it's kind of works super well that I can film the snakes as well and document them as nicely as possible, and then kind of share all of that with the world.
That's
and,
incredible.
Yeah, show people how cool and beautiful and amazing snakes can be.
Yeah, because they are all that and more.
Yeah, exactly.
What's like one of the biggest herping memories that sticks out for you? Because you've traveled the world herping also.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it was actually, I started, like I said, I've always kind of been a herper without allocating myself as the title as a herper.
Yes.
Until the point where it was, I think, 2018, Living Zoology put out a post, hey guys, we've got an extra spot. We're going to Uganda to look for these snakes. I was like, me.
I also responded when I was like, no, I don't have cash at that moment.
Yeah, and I made it happen, and we ended up actually going to do a purely herping trip. You know, I was always, if I'm in Mozambique and I'm on a family holiday and there's a snake, I'm there catching the snake and kind of showing people and then release the snake. And this is where my kind of documentation of my whole experience about herping out in the wild and seeing these animals out in the wild and the reward of really seeing these snakes out in the wild and changing people's mindsets, especially locals. You know, we've got some peeps in Uganda that have completely done a 180 or 360 degree turn in terms of how they used to look at snakes in the forest as a kind of commodity to now actually falling in love with them and completely changing and wanting to do snake safaris and stuff like that. So
incredible.
Super cool. So I would say some big highlights have definitely always been with Living Zoology. Finding Schneider eye in the dunes.
Ooh, but it's Schneider eye. It's one of the dwarf adders.
And I mean, it was, you know, you can track them through the sand, which is always...
It's in fact the world's smallest
snakes,
viper,
smallest viper in the world, or adder in the world. And, you know, you can track these things through the sand, etc., like a lot of your like cerastes and your sandwiders and things around the world. So you've got a little like visual cues.
Yes.
But when you start seeing tracks everywhere and you follow them to nothing for a longer period of time, it gets very infuriating.
Yeah.
And most people would think that like you would have them shuffle in the first 5 centimeters. You know, if they're hunting, they would literally be on the surface, their heads still kind of sticking out. And we followed this one track and it just disappeared. And we're like, no, this is impossible. This is a super fresh track. This snake is here. And we start digging. No gloves, I know, my bad. And we start digging and now we 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters, still nothing. And then my che tells me, he's like, dude, you're doing this with your bare hands and you're probably already too deep. And by the time we got to around 30 centimeters deep, my last scoop, as he says, you should probably be wearing gloves. My last scoop, out comes this flippin' Schneider eye, 30 centimeters deep under the dune.
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know they could
completely
even bury
mind blown.
themselves.
Normally we thought
deep.
like when we were initially doing it, we would take like our hook stick or whatever and very gently rake it over the 5-10 centimeters, the first top layer. This thing was deep.
Wow.
This thing was really deep. It was at
That's
least
the
20,
first
30
for me.
centimeters under the sand. And when that snake popped out, man, jeez. 2 herpers hugging each other very, very hard, man.
the bromance is like
the
real.
bromance got strong, dude. It was incredible to have that moment of like finding the snake you've been looking for like maybe 2 days now. And you find this little snake. And it happens often.
Tears of joy.
Big tears of joy.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
And what else was it? I mean, yeah, there's almost too many to name.
Yeah, it's almost like because this becomes like a normal thing, part of your day in and day out, that there's not that many things that stand out because everything is just so amazing and so many things happen. Like a normal day in my life is probably the craziest day in somebody else's life. That type of thing.
Sure.
So it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, and then I have to go to the Albanica trip. So we went to do a trip for Inonata and Albanica, and we found one Inonata literally on the last evening before we were meant to leave. So we found that Inonata in the morning, take photos, film, and then go and release the snake. My mate went to go get the car ready and packed, and I go to the original release location, which is super important for some of these dwarf species.
Yeah.
To release almost at the exact like site of where you found the snake. So go back to the exact
before
site.
you go on there, what do you do to like release them in the same spot? Do you have like a GPS tracker?
Yeah. So as we find the snake, we have a Google Maps marker. We mark a marker, and then you take it almost back to the exact same rock. Most of your slower moving species, adders and things like that, it's less important with your elapids, supposedly. But there's quite a few papers out stating that your vipers, like Raglar's pit vipers for Indonesia, your dwarf adders from South Africa, and then your maybe rattlesnakes and certain things that have dens in areas that they kind of occupy quite regularly. If you move them far enough distance away from their little home ranges or their home patches, they can get quite stressed out trying to get back home.
Okay.
And so releasing them at the exact catch site is super important. So I went back to the same site, and as I took last couple picks, I released it under a nice big slab, and I look around the other side of the slab, and there's another Inonata just sitting there basking in situ. I'm
Right by where you released the other Inonata.
So I literally look back under, and you guys will see this in the video as when I finally edit it. I'm like, this can't be the same snake, because the snake I was busy with was still quite huffy puffy, and this snake was lying perfectly in situ. I lift the rock, and there's two Inonatas sitting under the rock. It was literally like a mind-blowing moment, and I was all by myself because the other herp buddy was down busy getting the car ready. So I was literally up there kind of doing a little dance by myself. And I had no time to film the snakes, so I took a couple photos and let them be. I put them under separate rocks. But incredible moments. And then to go on to...
And just so people know, that's not an easy snake to find. It's an endangered species, or is it critically endangered?
So I would put it as endangered species after kind of, if we will do the comparison to the Albany adder after this, is Inonata or the plain mountain adder. They live in a very remote region of the world, of South Africa. There's very few people. I think poaching would probably be their only kind of pressure at the moment. So there's a couple livestock things happening, but that's sheep farmers where sheep are moving through the land and things like that. But if you look at the mountain range, it goes on and on and on and on forever. And the amount of rocks there, I mean, we must have flipped maybe 1,500, 2,000 rocks between the two of us in 2 days. There's so much habitat for those animals, so it's endangered, but it's data deficient. There's not enough research done on the animal to actually ascertain population. They're very tough to find. They live really high up in the kind of very alpine areas, pretty much. So finding those snakes, it's not easy, but I don't think it's too hard either if you really put in the hours.
Says you flipped 2,000 rocks.
No, it's hard going. Yeah, okay, I'll take it back. It's really not easy to find these snakes. You got to really put in them out. And still, in 2 days, that's still getting lucky.
Yes.
Because I know peeps who've gone to look for them and not find them 3-4 trips in a row.
Yeah.
So I guess it's maybe just good juju, because I've got positive intentions out there where some guys maybe don't have the best intentions with going out there and collecting these animals.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, and then 2 days later to arriving in Port Elizabeth area to go look for albanica. And geez, we got information about different locations and different places to go, and there's a lot of restricted land areas, and we walked a lot. I mean, in the first 5-6 days, I think we walked an average. Our biggest day was 68 kilometers. So I think just an average, or let's call it ballpark, 400 Ks in the 6 days of walking.
And it's not like there's trails or anything.
No.
You make your own trails.
You make your own trails, and everything out there is out to scratch you. And there's tiny little holes, and then you start thinking there's reports of them going down because it's limestone areas. So there's a lot of porous areas, a lot of cavities and rocks and cracks and things like that. And after 6 days of looking, we're like, okay, that's it. We're done. We're ready to go home. We get back to our accommodation, ready to check out. And then BioNerds is an incredible organization, NGO, that work with
tortoises,
with tortoises, but also endangered fauna and flora all over. They've actually the one team that are busy doing active work in that area to raise awareness with different farm owners about the species and protecting it and not allowing people to come potentially future collect, etc. And they arrived that day, and we were leaving that evening, and they went for an evening road cruise and found their first road cruise. So me and my mate were like, no, this is too much. We've just put in 6 days. We are extending by a day, and we're going to go out. We road cruised, didn't find anything, and then decided to take another approach. I'm not going to give too much details away, but we did a different approach, and we ended up finding 4 individuals in the space of 12 hours.
Wow, and that is a critically endangered species.
A critically endangered animal with... Probably they say there's around 20 sightings, but that would be scientific sightings. So obviously of people actively going out to look for the snake and finding them. So since I think 2007 they were considered extinct, and then 1997 they were considered extinct. By 1997 they were refound by BioNerds and a couple people. And since then I think there's been between 15 to 20 scientific sightings. And then in our trip, we found 4. So that's a pretty good number
That's
in the
insane.
grand scheme of things.
After like 6 days.
Yeah. So, I mean, that will also probably be a world first 4K footage of that species of snake, and really well documented, that snake. So I've got
So you
an
got
episode,
it in 4K. Nice.
all in 4K. And yeah, we shot that snake, those four individuals.
Shot as in filmed, guys,
Yes,
just by the way.
yeah. Shoot animals with your camera, not with guns.
Exactly. I know, because what's his name? A lot of the older herpers would actually take a tutu out and shoot the animals because they can't catch them, just so they can get scale counts and that. We don't do that in this generation.
No. I mean, even still now, I mean, there was a lot of validity to when we found the polemon, the snake eater, which would have been a first record for the area.
Yeah, they want you to kill it.
Old herpetologists, old regime would have definitely, I mean, and it probably would have been valid now still, because then we would have actually, to be able to ascertain exactly what it is with a genetic study. But I can't bring myself to do that.
No, exactly. We got too much of a heart for the animal.
Yeah,
even though it might be good for the scientific literature in the future.
You know what? If you want to, and if there is any people out there that are keen enough to be able to ascertain what it was, go to Kakamega, put a research group together, get some funding, and make it happen. Mm-hmm. And go because we didn't have ethanol, we didn't have scientific grade ethanol, we didn't have ways and means to be able to actually transport the snake. It would have been very MacGyver quick sticks, and then now the genetic material gets ruined by the time it gets to the lab, and you've killed the snake for no reason.
Yeah.
So if it happens by hapstance, I think let the snake go. If you're there to do active research and to actually figure it out, then it's a different story.
Yes.
But we were there to photograph and document, and not to
not
to remove them from the wild. Found in the wild, left in the wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the way. Just shoot them in 4K.
There we go. I wish it was 6K, and they would have lasted a little bit longer. But
8K now. Red Dragon or whatever.
Yeah.
Awesome. This was an incredible episode, and I definitely think we're going to have to do quite a few more in the future, because you've got some insane herping stories. Yeah. And then in the future, I'm going to definitely come
join
with.
us.
100%. That's going to be lacquer.
That sounds good.
So you've already stated where everybody can follow you, right?
Yeah. So Matt Van Geo, MATVANGEO. And pretty much on all socials, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Come give me a follow. I've got plenty of good stuff coming up. I've just been a lazy editor, work and life gets busy.
Yeah, because he's a filmmaker. He likes the camera, not the editing.
There we go. So getting over my editing block has been a thing, but please do bear with me. There's some good content coming, and I will appreciate any kind of viewership, subscribers. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button.
Yeah.
And remember to stand for what we stand on.
Yeah. And learn, explore, inspire, and live it. Cheers, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you, Matt.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
It's been a
pleasure.
That was awesome.